With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos Daf Chav Beis. We left off on Daf Chav Aleph Amid Beis, 13 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Today we're going to start indeed with the Mai Chanukah. What is the reason? What's the origin of Chanukah here in the Gemara? We're going to learn the concept that lechatchila, that it's an initial preference to place the lights of the menorah in the home. Dafke betoich asara means within 10 tfachim, which is the big exception to the rule, like we spoke out in yesterday's Hagdama that we have in Sukkah Dafei, that me'olam lo yarda shchina lamata masara tfachim. We're going to learn the concept that Ner Chanukah should be mismoil on the other side, and the mezuzah has to be dafke miyamin. We're going to learn about the concept of Bizu Mitzvah, not to disrespect a mitzvah, not to disrespect a embellishment of a mitzvah, not to disrespect that which comes out of a mitzvah, or in the positive, the requirement to act respectfully towards mitzvahs. How this relates to Chanukah, that's going to be connected to the question whether you can light one candle of the menorah from another candle of the menorah proper. And actually, that is going to lead us into all in the same place, the three arguments between Rob and Schmuel, in which, like Rashi says, that normally the rule is Rob and Schmuel. If they are arguing in an area of Isura, the halacha is Kirav be'Isura chutz mitlas, the three will be today. And that's going to be the topic, whether Rav says, Ein madlikin miner lener, Shmuel says, madlikin miner lener. Rav holds, Ein matirin tzitzis mi beged lebeged. In other words, you have this old garment and you want to take off the tzitzis to put it on a new garment. The tzitzis is going to be used. Parenthetically, the tzitzis themselves, they're not tashmishe kedusha, they're only called tashmishe mitzvah. We spoke about this, but we'll speak about it in a moment. Like we don't have to put the tzitzis in shemus. You can't throw it away disrespectfully. You can put it in a bag and throw it in the garbage. Halacha l'maisa. Tashmishe kedusha is that which has Tanakh written on it, or things that serve scripture. Even a bima has more kedusha than the tzitzis themselves. But still, the old beged was used for a mitzvah. Taking it off from the old beged, putting it onto a new beged is disrespecting the old beged. So you're not disrespecting the mitzvah, you're disrespecting that which was used for a mitzvah. Could you do it or not? Rav says not, Shmuel says yeah. And the third machlokes, which is not related, is regarding the famous Shitas Rebbe Shimon here in Masechta Shabbos and Hilchah Shabbos regarding Davar She'ein Mischaven. The example would be whether you can drag a chair, a bench in your backyard, in your front yard, when it might make a indentation / furrow / hole in the ground. Making a furrow in the ground is charisha. Making holes outdoors can be connected or indoors to binyan. Here, your intention is not to make a furrow, not to make a hole. You want to get the bench from here to there, and without having to pick it up. And it's not certainly going to be furrowed. Rabbi Shimon says you are allowed to do it lechatchila. Rabbi Yehuda says you may not do it. Who do we paskin like? Here again, machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Rav says ein halacha ki Rabbi Shimon. Rav is machmir. Shmuel says halacha ki Rabbi Shimon. And in these three, we paskin like Shmuel, which is the big chiddush. We're going to learn so much about menorah, about Chanukah. We're going to have the big machlokes today, whether, guys, listen to the words, hadlaka oisa mitzvah, or whether hanacha oisa mitzvah. This is big. What does that mean? Hadlaka oisa mitzvah means that we're going to view the act of the kindling of the menorah as the principal part of the mitzvah. Of course, the menorah has to be placed somewhere. We'll see. You can't hold it in your hand. But the main mitzvah is the lighting it. Hanacha oisa mitzvah would mean that, of course, the only way you're going to have a menorah lit, placed in a location, is by lighting it. But lighting it is viewed more as a preliminary, as a hechsher mitzvah. The main part of the mitzvah is the placement of the menorah, and we'll see various nafkaminas, whether we say one or the other. I'll give you just one example. Friday, because Shabbos, you have to light the menorah even earlier than usual. People end up till today putting a lot more oil in. What happens if a person had so much oil Friday that when they lit the menorah Friday for Shabbos, it burnt the ganze Shabbos, and it's Matzah Shabbos? So hadlaka oisa mitzvah obviously would mean you gotta put it out and light it again. Is that enough? Or do you also have to pick up the menorah and put it back down? Hanacha oise mitzvah might lead us to understand that it's not just about the relighting it. You have to actually replace it. Can be in the same place. And other such nuanced but big differences and a lot more. Chavra, let's start again. Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. Like we mentioned, it's 3.5 daf, and it's Gavaldik. Even though we're learning Masechta Shabbos, which is also Gavaldik, but we're going from Shabbos to Chanukah. The link was the types of wicks and fuels and oils that may or may not be used. So Chavra, 13 lines before the bottom of the Amid, towards the end of the narrow lines, my Chanukah. There is no scripture for Chanukah. And even though the Tzedukim and the Baisusim and those that rejected Ezra HaSofer's closing of the canon, they wrote down what is now called the Maccabees. And Lahavdil, the Goyim have it. And there, when they wrote about the miracle of Chanukah, the focus was on the success in the battles and the wars and the miracles that happened. And we make mention to it in the davenings, that it was Taka Rabim Biyad Ma'atim. You know, the fact that few, we were the few, they were the many, we were the weak, they were the strong, that we won them, that is the focus in other sources that are not Jewish sources. What is the Nes of Chanukah in the Gemara, the Tanu Rabbanan? It wasn't about the miracle. Of course, that's a miracle, but the Iker celebration of Chanukah is for that which happened towards the end of the miracles of the wars. Now, again, there wasn't one ending of the war, there were many wars. But at one point, we had enough ability to go back into the Holy Temple that was completely defiled by the Syrian Greeks. So it says, we learned in the Braisa, on the 25th of Kislev, Yoim the Chanukah, you begin the days of Chanukah, but it's not a one-day holiday, but Teman Ya'inun, it's an 8-day holiday. How do we express its celebration? And if you remember, actually, we learned, and we will learn many quotations from what we call Megillas Tainus. Megillas Tainus was a compilation of the oral Torah written before Rebbe wrote the Mishnah. That's why it's called, my friends, a Megillah, because we were not allowed to record the oral Torah. So it was written like a scroll. It was not Tanakh. But there they recorded all of the major and minor holidays in which we have to have some level of celebration. We're not speaking about the holiday like we have in the Chumash, where you can't do malacha. No, but how do we express the Yom Tiv? The loyal mitzvah behind that. If, God forbid, someone is being buried, or if someone was buried in the past and you want to make a gathering to make a eulogy, it may not be done during these 8 days. Hisanas behind, one may not fast during the 8 days of Chanukah. Why? Because when the Yevanim entered the Heichal, entered the sanctuary, they purposefully, ritually defiled all of the oils that were in the Heichal. In other words, the beautiful part of the service in the temple, they were not fighting against. They found it beautiful because it is beautiful. But what were they fighting against? This spiritual, holy, beyond reason connection that we have with God, that God has with us. And this is expressed by the laws of Tum and Tara, which are supra-rational laws. And when the household of the kingdom of the Chashmonaim became strengthened, gained the upper hand, the Nitzchum, and won over the Yevanim. But they made a search for Lematzu, and they didn't find Elapach Echad Shel Sham, and they only found one jug of oil. That it was laying B'chois Moishel Kohen Gadol with the seal of the Kohen Gadol. Now let me just give a quick Hilchas Tum and Tara. Earthenware utensils, which was where this oil was laying, even if there was contact from something impure, but the contact was only to the outside of that utensil, it will not impart tumah. However, just to know the fact, midrabanan, all of the goyim have the tumah of a zav. A zav can impart tumah, my friends, to an earthenware utensil that's sealed, that's closed, without contact with anything inside directly by moving it. That's called hesed. Because if you think about it, if I move a utensil in its entirety, I also move the inside airspace. So there was contact with it. But, now guys, parenthetically, we're going to learn at the end of the Chagiga that even though Chazal gave a Am Ha'aretz the status of a Zav, Midrabanan, but because of Takonas Hashuk, by Yidden that are Amaratzim, that have rabbinically the level of Zav, they do not impart Tumas Hesed, because then How would you be able to buy a utensil in the marketplace? It would be very difficult by limiting it to only those that were manufactured by Chaverim. By Goyim, there's no limit. If a Goy moved the jug, it becomes impure. So you get it, Shmueli, what's the kasha? Who cares? How did it help that it was sealed with the seal of the Kohen Gadol? If the Yevanim would have moved it, it would be Tameh anyway. The answer is that since they were Metame, all of the oils, so if they would have found that jug, they wouldn't only have moved it. They don't know that. They would have removed the seal. They would have looked for its contents. Maybe there was something precious for them. The fact that it was still sealed is a proof, a halachic proof, that they didn't even find it. They didn't find it, they didn't move it. All right, that nuance is a halachic nuance. There was only enough oil to light one day, and the miracle happened, and it burned for 8 days. Like we mentioned yesterday, all of the Sfarim that have 100 answers and more. So it's only a 7-day miracle because there was enough oil for one day. And to go to the end, that the Rebbe's approach is that the miracle began on the first day because the oil was not diminished at all. Hold on. We can only do a mitzvah through natural means. Oil that doesn't get diminished, miraculous oil, that was the part of the miracle. The nimnahan nois miracle, that it remained oil with the characteristics of oil. Oil that when you burn it, it gets consumed, and still it didn't get consumed.
So okay. Diminished on the 8th day.
So according to this, we have to figure out, so what happened on the 8th day? So it didn't burn on the 8th day either. Till when we had new oil, we had that oil. Let's go right. Shana Acheres, the next year, Kavuam, the sages established these 8 days as Va'aso'um Yomim Tovim. They made us celebrate these days with Yomim Tovim. So before in Megillas Tainus, we mentioned the negative celebration. No Hespedim, no eulogies, and no fast days. How do we positively express the Yom Tov? By Hallel, which we add in the davening, and the Hoida'ah, which is what we call the prayer of Al Hanissim, that we add both in the Moedim prayer, in the Shemona Esrei, and in the benching in the second bracha, right? Al Haaretz Val Hamazon, beginning between Noid Elocha and Va'al HaKoil. Elohoir, that is there an inyan to add a little bit in food? Rambam says, yeah. But like, for example, Purim, that there was a gzera against the physical of the Jew. So when God made a miracle, we celebrated Begashmias by making a Su'udas Purim, amongst other things. Since the emphasis here, they were not fighting against the Jew, they were fighting against the Jewish soul, against Yiddishkeit. So the main celebration is a Yiddishkeit celebration, as we just read. Now, Tanan we learned in a Mishnah. And we're going to Bava Kama. The Mishnah says gates. Gates means a spark. That came flying out from under a blacksmith's hammer. The Yotza, the Hizik, and the spark went directly and it burned someone else's property up. So first of all, the rule is chayiv. The one who slammed the hammer is considered one who's directly involved in that damage. And we're going to learn many more details in Bava Kama. Because indirect damage is something for which in a Beis Din, in a human court, you would not be obliged to pay. Grama bin Izakin is spotted. The spark flying out from under the hammer is called direct damage. Says the Mishnah further, Gumel, if you have a camel, Shaton, Pishtan, that's laden with flax, and it's going through the marketplace, it's going through the public fair. And there was so much flax on this camel that it was protruding from both sides. And just imagine, let's say today, the Shuk in Yerushalayim, the old city, it's very narrow. So there's enough room for the camel to walk down the street. But now that you have Azah on a laden camel, the Nichnas HaPishtanai, this person's flax went inside. It went inside stores. Not only that, people in the stores, they had torches, they had lights. So Vidalka, and now the flax became a flame because it rushed by the torch of the store shopkeeper, and the camel kept on walking. And now the fire spread. The hidlik asabiram. So who is considered the one that's negligent? Who's negligent? Not the Bal HaChenveni. I have the right to light a fire inside my store. Who's negligent? Bal HaGomel Chayiv. However, says the Mishnah, but if it was Chanukah, I'm sorry, if it's not Chanukah and he put this fire outside his store, then we consider the Chenveni the one liable. He should have known the way it worked then, that people with animals, if they are a little bit full, there's such a possibility the negligent one is going to be reliable. Rabbi Yehuda adds, B'ner Chanukah pater. Why is that? Because since, like we learned, that there is a big persuma nisa importance of spreading the miracle, of advertising the miracle, of letting everyone know about the miracle, which is why you're supposed to light the ner Chanukah mibachutz. And by Chanukah, it's not a secondary part of the mitzvah; it's part and parcel of the mitzvah. To the point that when there is no persuma nisa, you won't necessarily even get the mitzvah of lighting the candles of Chanukah. So you're obligated to light it outside. There's persuma nisa of the household. Let's not get into this right now. So therefore, what's your question?
My question is that does that mean that like you're doing a public good that and you damage things that you're no longer chayav?
No, it's not so simple. Okay, we get to Baba Kama.
So was the Baba Gomel chayav?
No, so he wants to know whether the Baba Gomel. The answer is yes. It's whoever knew that there's such a thing out there and did not take the precautions is the one that's negligent. Now, Amar Avina, in the name of Rava, or in the parentheses in the name of Rabba, now I can learn something. I can extrapolate the following. Zoy Meres, Ner Chanukah, the mitzvah of Chanukah, the placement of the Ner Chanukah is mitzvah lanicha b'tei chasor. The ideal is to place it within 10 handbreadths from the ground. Al pinigla shmuli sumanisa. In other words, when you're standing in your house and something is placed within 10 tfachim, everyone will see it a lot better. When you're putting it right outside your door of your house, and it's in order to be mefarsen, the miracle to the people that walk into the yard, they'll see it even easier and quicker when it's within 10 tvachim. That's the al pinigla. And by the way, al pinigla, when people live in a building, there's no such a thing anymore of b'tei chasada when they put it on the windowsill. We're speaking about when you're putting it for the people that are on your same level. Now, what's the proof? Because the is al-kadai, the second to last line, that l'mayla masada, that the mitzvah should be dafka above 10 or even higher, 10 handbreadths. Then lay, then let the damaged party tell the shopkeeper that what? Why is Rabbi Yehuda saying that the shopkeeper is exempt? Because he did a mitzvah. No, he didn't have to do the mitzvah that low. If you can put it higher up, then he can tell, then he can argue, you should have put the Chanukah higher than where the gomel with the rider can reach. But we don't have such a counterclaim. That's because it's ideal to place it dafka lamata masara tvachim. There was no other way other than placing it where it was placed. The Gemara says it's not a proof because the Dilma, maybe the menorah can really be placed above. However, the Chachamim were unable to insist on that because if they're going to insist to the shopkeepers, you have to put it that high, then then they might not do the mitzvah. And this is it. Not everyone has cranes like Chabad, says Shloimeh. In other words, this is a rabbinic rule. This is not a biblical rule. And you have to measure how much do you insist until you come to the point where you know that you're going to lose people getting on board. So do not insist that. I just want to share a very beautiful story. What the earlier Tolna Rebbe, when he lit the menorah once, and he looked around the room, and it happened to be that in that room, there was a very tall chassid that had a very short wife. Short meaning physically short. So right after he lit him later, he turned to the chassid and he says, let me ask you a question. He says, when you talk to your wife, do you bend down to her or does she have to lift herself up to you? No one answered. So later the Hasidim asked the Rebbe, what point were you trying to make? And he quoted the Gemara in Sukkah. The Gemara in Sukkah says the fact that God's voice came out from Mibein Shnei Hakruvim, as the Gemara says in Sukkah, the Cheshbon, that was above 10 Tfachim. And that's why we have a tradition that the Shechina never comes within 10 Tfachim. What's the big exception? Chanukah. That by Chanukah, you place the menorah at least lechatchila, it's not ma'akev, within 10 Tfachim. And that's very, very significant spiritually because that means that the Shechina, that God comes down. That means even when we are on a lower state, so God, you can say, will expect for us to get up. But if we're not up yet, then what? Then God comes down to our level. And as the Rebbe always insisted, connected to the coming of Mashiach, that it's going to be lamata ma'asara tvach. And that's the unique power of the Chanukah menorah, that it's done at night, that it's done mibachutz. We'll see soon. It's done on the left side, and add to that, it's done lamata ma'asara tvach, which is really, it goes. Godliness has so much power, right? We have this in the Basal Lagani Maimer that lamata, it goes down with no end, with no limit. No matter how low the reality is, the infinity of godliness manifests, and that is big Ashmias through the candles of the Chanukah. Says the Gemara Amar of Kahana. The last line of the Amid. Darash Rab Nasan Bar Manyume. In the name of Rebbe Tanchaim, Daf Chav Beis, Neir Chanukah Shenicha L'mayla Michav. If you put the candle of Chanukah, if you put the menorah above 20 ames, not 20 tvachim, 20 ames, it will be invalid. Here again, the concept of spreading the miracle, of advertising the miracle, let's use the words Bizu Mitzvah, is part of the mitzvah of lighting the menorah. It's not a secondary benefit. When you place something above 20 ames, when a person is standing, they will naturally not look up that high. Now, if there's a building, it's different, and they're looking in the windowsill because the building draws your attention. But if there's no building, you just had like a pole, and you put it on top of the pole, then you will not fulfill your obligation, as is the law by a sukkah, that if the schach is going to be placed above 20 amas. I know there's a machlokes tanoim, but we paskin it will not be kosher, as will be in the next Masechta Eruvin. When it comes to the mavui, one of the ways we solve this cul-de-sac is by putting at its open entrance a koira. You can put a lechi and a koira. We'll learn that in Eruvin. Here we have a good picture. The koira means there's a cross beam, but it has to be visible, and if it's placed above 20 amas, it will not be kosher. Now, for Omar Rav Kahana, another statement of Rav Kahana. Darash Rav Nasan Bar Manyume in the name of Rav Tanchaim. What's the meaning of the pasuk in Vayeshev? Haboirek. There, Reuven, as the Torah testifies, wanted to save Yosef, but his suggestion was that temporarily they should throw him into the spit. And the Torah testifies to the fact that the Haboirek ain't by Moyim, the boy was empty, had no water. So this is superfluous because if it's empty, empty is empty. Why do you have to add it had no water? To which he answered, no, it's not mamash empty. Water was empty from it, but it was filled with snakes and scorpions. So you have the drasha that if a person's mind is filled with Torah, with mayim, automatically all of the narashkaitin will be kicked out. There'll be no room for it. If a person finds that they have nachashim and akravim in their mind, why v'haboy reik? One is connected to the other. Now, I heard a gewaldige word that normally when you have these agadatas, at least superficially, what's the connection between one and the other? The same author. Here it's very obvious what the connection is. Because just like you cannot see what's lamayla machaf, you cannot see what's lamata machaf amas. And the Torah testifies that Reuven wanted to save his brother. So why would Reuven want to throw him into a pit that has nachashim v'akravim? So that's the answer, because since your sight doesn't go beyond 20 amas, it must be, it says vayashlech, they threw him, that the pit was very deep. The pit was deeper than 20 amas, so they were unable to see what was under there. That's the gavaldik, that's the connection between one and the other, amongst many other reasons.
With a pit, I don't think you have to go into this that's that deep. Meaning above the ground is 20 amas.
I know. I forgot. You're correct.
10 tvachim or whatever.
Very good. Right. Good. Could be. Omar Rabbo says Rabbo. Another expression of Bizu Mitzvah. Again, we learned yesterday, you're ideally supposed to place it right outside your door. But outside your door, within 1 handbreadth of your door. Why? Because the Bizu Mitzvah isn't only to see the menorah; it's to know that you placed the menorah there. If it's even only 1 handbreadth away from your door, from your doorway, an observer might think someone else put it there. So you don't have the Bizu Mitzvah that you put it there. And by the way, where do we have this din of a tefach? The beginning of Hilchos Mezuzah. That when you place a mezuzah. By the way, when people have front doors that are thick, like we have here in the shul. So it says in the Torah that ideally you're supposed to place the mezuzah the closest to the Rosh Hashanah. It's within a tefach of the Rosh Hashanah, on the doorpost. Here, this portion, it's a very thick doorpost. Then there's another door. When the Rosh came here once, he said to put up another mezuzah, so not a sign, because we put ours up mamish by the street, obviously in the right place, but it's so far away from the actual door that we placed another mezuzah. Okay. Now, on which side do you put it on? The Rava says on the right side going in. Also by mezuzahs, you say the right side. People get confused. The right side, which way? The right side going in. Rav Shmuel Midifti says na mismoil. The left side going in, the opposite side of the mezuzah, and indeed that's the halachem. That what? That mismoil. Why? Mismoil umezuzah miyamin. And how many Maimonic Hasidus you have on this topic? So again, you have it to light it up at dark. And the shir, or for whom, is Rigla the Talmudoi, which, by the way, we learned yesterday, the Rigla the Talmudoi, and those people that would sell fuel, they were goyim. So there's a big discussion, halacha l'maisa, whether persuminisa is only for goyim, whether it's persuminisa. Some people say yeah. Some people say no. Even though the Talmudoians were not Yidden, but the persuminisa has to be for dafki. Right. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Asi. Now, we touched yesterday on the topic of whether you can benefit from the light that comes from the flames of the Chanukah menorah. And Rav, as we learned on Daf Chaf Aleph on the base on the top, Rav, who says that you may not light, Rav says that the fuels and the wicks that may not be used for Shabbos could be used for the menorah. Shemayata, they're not burning well, because Rav holds you can't use it anyways. Now let's go further. So Rav Yehuda says the name of Rav Asi, we'll skip the parentheses. You may not count money by the light of the menorah. Now, you may not count money. Is he saying what Rav is saying? Or is he saying something that Rav is not saying? And the big discussion amongst the Rishonim, just to quote the Balamoir holds that the Rav holds that you may not use the light, not even for a mitzvah. Bachlal. Rav Asi, who gives the example, you may not count money towards the light, is trying to emphasize if you're doing a mitzvah, for that you can use the light. Counting money, normally in the case where it's not mitzvah related, that's the Baal HaMoed. There's a Rosh and there's a Ramban. There's many different approaches. But this is under the very broad umbrella is you can't just use the lights of the menorah. However, Ki Amrita Kamei de Shmuel, Amali, why not? There is no inherent Kedusha in the light, meaning, so therefore you can use it. Hold on. Maskav Rabbi Yosef, but just because there's no Kedusha, therefore you can use it? Is it Kedusha or not Kedusha? There's Kedusha, we said there's Mitzvah, there's Bizu Mitzvah. He gives a great example. V'chidam Kedusha yesh boy. There's a mitzvah in the Torah that when you slaughter either a non-domesticated animal or a bird, chaya or an oif, there's a mitzvah to cover its blood. There's no Kedusha in that blood. Yet, we learned in a Braisa, based on the pasuk in Achri Mois, v'shafach v'chisa, the pasuk actually writes, v'shafach es domai v'chisohu be'ofar. Now the Torah juxtaposes these words. Shafach, splitting the blood, means for yit shechting and covering. The fact that they're put together teaches us that b'mesha shafach, with that which you use to spill the blood, which is with your hand, that should be used to cover the blood. In other words, don't cover the blood kicking dirt with your feet. It's disrespectful. Why is that? So the kasha is, so you see there's a concept of a Bizu Mitzvah, even if there's no Kedusha. Using the light, you're right, there's no Kedusha in the light. But still, to use it for a non-mitzvah, Bizoyim. So Shmuel argues, no. Hachinami, and therefore Hachinami, that's the kasha. Here also, you're wrong, Shmuel. We should say that Shaloyio Mitzvah's Bezuyis Olav. Now, obviously, Shmuel doesn't accept that as a problem, because you can't compare kicking dirt with your foot to do a mitzvah. We're using the light. Ubefrat, that the flame is the mitzvah. The flame is the mitzvah. The light that comes out of the flame is a step removed from the mitzvah. And again, counting money is taka a uvda dechoil but it's not disrespectful. So Shmuel rejects this. Says the Gemara, boy, my name is Rabbi Yehuda ben Rabbi Shua ben Levi, going le'inyan, not deriving mundane benefit from that which was designated for a mitzvah. In the umbrella of Bizu Mitzvah, you are disrespecting the mitzvah. If a person decorates one sukkah, the mitzvah is the schach, but this is what we call the embellishment of a mitzvah. Is there an inyan not to disrespect? Disrespecting meaning using it for your personal use. Could you or could you not? So he responded. Rabbi Shmuel responded. No, we know that. Asur lahartzois mois keneged nar Chanukah. He used us as a source. Since we are holding, right, that you may not, like Ravasi, not like Shmuel, you may not use the light, the illumination of the menorah to count money. And you're right, we're not using the flame, we're using the light from the flame. It means the concept of Bizu Mitzvah is not directly only to the mitzvah. So similarly, even though the Noye Sukkah is only, so to say, a embellishment of a mitzvah, you may not disrespect it, which would mean to make use of it. Can't count your own money. Making use is called bizui, making bizui. Now, what he said is correct. The only challenge that we're going to have against him is that this is the way Torah Shabbal Peh works. When someone asks a question, first scan through the whole written Torah Shabbal Peh at the time and use that which is written as the source. And if there is a question that's similar to the case that's written, say, since it says the jurisprudence, since it says it's written regarding here, so I'll apply it over there. The kasha will be that whether you can use Noye Sukkah, which you may not, is written befedish. That is the source. From there, we should learn towards not using the lights of the menorah to count money. His response was, just like you can't use the light of the menorah to count money, therefore, similarly, the teacher becomes Chanukah and the student becomes Noye Sukkah. So Amar Rabbi Yosef, Mari de Avram, the master of Avram. It's in English, God Almighty. It's a shock. Tali Tanya, B'deloi Tanya. You're basing a ruling that is taught based on the ruling that's not taught. It has to be the opposite. Sukkah is taka written. You're right. You can't have a hanah from Noye Sukkah. But that's the source. And Chanukah is the Loi Tanya. Now, where's the source? It's not a Mishnah, it's a Braisa, the Tanya. It says in a Braisa, guys, we have this in Sukkah, Sichacha, Kielchasa, that when you cover the Sukkah properly, that's vital. Because if you did not cover the Sukkah with proper schach, then there's no mitzvah, and there's no Noye Mitzvah. Then you have nothing. But now that you have schach, then v'itra b'karamim, you beautify the sukkah with karamim, with colored curtains, or ubesadinam hamitzuyarim, or with embroidered linens, and the kolabo you hung on your schach egoism nuts, afarsikin peaches, shkedim almonds, v'demoinim pomegranates, uparchile anovim, clusters of grapes, va'atari shal shubalim, and wreaths of grain, and yenos means you're hanging wine, you're hanging jars of wine, you're hanging jars of oil, you're hanging jars of flour, all to beautify your sukkah. Says the Braisa, Asur listapik mohem, you may not use any of that until the end of Yom Tov. However, the Braisa says a nuance, which is very complicated, that ve'im hisna leim, if you made a stipulation, and Ashi will tell us that we're going to learn this in great detail in Masechtas Beitza Daf Lamed, that if you made the stipulation prior to the entrance of Yom Tov, and that will be key, prior to Bein Hashmashos, and you said, I'm hanging these items here, they are not exclusively for Noye Sukkah. I'm hanging them here. If I want, I'll leave them here. If I want, I'll eat them up. You have to make that before Yom Tov comes in. And that's similar to many halachas we're going to learn in Masechta Shabbos regarding muktzah. Kiven the iskatzoi bein hashmashos. You know, there are certain times that if when Shabbos or Yom Tov comes in, a certain status is inferred on, is chal on an item, you cannot remove it later. So this stipulation, we'll learn this more in Beitza, has to be made dafka before Bein Hashmashos. Then, and only then, can you follow your stipulation. So the kasha is, you're saying good, but you're hanging, you're going in the wrong direction. You're making the student the teacher and the teacher the student. And the Gemara is actually rejecting this as well. Because if you want to quote the ultimate teacher, the real original source, then you have to quote the source of Dam Kachim. That should be the source. Notice when he asked the question, they asked from Rabbi Shua ben Levi, let's go back to the question, Mauli stapik minoy yisuka kol shiva. You know what he should have answered? No, you cannot. But how do I know that? not because of Chanukah. I know that from the fact that you can't kick the dirt to cover the earth. It's this this smichos of the shafach v'chisa. That's the source that in the negative you cannot be mavaza mitzvahs. You can't be disrespectful. In the positive, you have to respect even the embellishment of mitzvahs, which is expressed by you leaving it for the mitzvah itself. Okay, and here we go with the three arguments between Rav and Schmuel that Rashi writes here 11 lines before the bottom. Again, the rule that even though hilchas kerav be'isurei bekula hashas. The three big exceptions where we paskin like Shmuel will be the following three. So Itman, argument number one. Amar Rav says, Ein madlikin mined lened. You may not light the candles of the menorah one from the other. We're going to see nuance in a moment. How were you to do that? There are two ways of doing it. We'll see what are they talking about. Shmuel says madlikin. And by the way, this is very much connected to the topic whether you can use the light of the menorah to count your money, because it's going to be connected to the general topic of Bizu Mitzvah, not disrespecting a mitzvah. Rav says, Ein matirin tzitzis mi beged lebeged, the first white line. You may not untie the tzitzis strands from an older garment, even though you're going to use them, and you're going to place them on a newer garment, or old, new. Why can't you do that? Because you're disrespecting the old garment. The old garment is not a mitzvah, but it's a embellishment of a mitzvah. It's the talus of a mitzvah. Shmuel says, yeah, matirini beged lebeged. Now, don't forget, Shmuel also subscribes to Bizu Mitzvah, like we mentioned above. You can't kick the dirt on the blood. Here, Shmuel says you are allowed to do it. You know why? Because you are using the tzitzis for a mitzvah. There has to be a justification. So he doesn't view it as a Bizu Mitzvah. Rav Amar, third argument, when it comes to the topic of the dragging of the bench, the dragging of the table or the chair on top of earth, and even though it might create a furrow, it might make a hole, which is chaydish, which is boina, that's not your intention. It's called davar she'ein mischaven. Shmuel says mutar lechatchila. Rav says we don't paskin like Rab Shimon. It's not also biblically. It's not chayev chatos, but it's also midrabanan. Shmuel says, says Abaye, my master, who was Abaye's master? His stepfather, Rabba bar Nachmani. That in the behavior of my master of Rabba bar Nachmani, he always paskin like Rav. Now, really, we have another rule that Rav and Shmuel, halachik Shmuel b'mamoina, and Rabba is not. We're not debating that. We're focusing on the parts of Torah that are in the category of Isura, Labar Mahani Tlas, aside of the three, the Avad Kishmol. What did Rabba do? Yes, Madlikin Miner Lener. Yes, Umatirin, you can untie tzitzis from an older garment, from the original garment to the new garment. And yes, Halacha Kerab Shimon Begreid. And now we're going to go out of the order because it's simpler, to the shorter, to the longer. The time has been learned in a Brais. Rab Shimon Oimer. Goyder Adam, a person is allowed to drag, whether it's a bed, mito, whether it's a kisei chair, whether it's a safsel, a bench. As long as he doesn't have in mind to make the furrow, making the furrow is either chaydish or boina. Let's go back now to the first machlokes, whether you can be madlik, whether you can kindle the menorah one from the other. Especially we learned yesterday that you light many candles, right? Basilo, second night you're lighting two, or even not. If you go by the mahadrin, every person has a candle. So Tama the Rav is the reason for Rav that he does not allow you to do it is because of Bizu Mitzvah. That's very important. What's the Bizu Mitzvah? This is the key. Because his understanding, how would you light one from the other, Chavra? Not directly. Directly, according to this, is not a Bizui. How would you, if you have candle one and candle two, candle one is already aflame, you would take a wood chip, a kesam. Today you would take a match and you would put the match to the mitzvah. At that moment, you are transferring the fire from a mitzvah flame to a non-mitzvah flame. Even though then you're going to transfer it over, you're doing it for that. It's like what it sits as by Shmuel. Shmuel says you can do it because ultimately it's for a mitzvah. But the Bizu Mitzvah, which he's focusing on, will only disallow you to do it through a match, through a kesem, because of that moment where it's going from a mitzvah to a non-mitzvah. And Shmuel will hold again that, that's not called Bizu Mitzvah. Amalahu, No. Don't listen to this. Don't listen to Rav Ada bar Ahava. It's more than that. Tamad Rav is because you're makrish mitzvah. You are weakening. And Rashi adds and emphasizes, it appears, that's key. It appears that you are diminishing the mitzvah. What does that mean? Forget about a match. Not a match. Even if I'm going direct. Candle 2 of the menorah directly from candle number 1. When you have a flame and you put something else to it, it appears like for a moment the flame gets diminished. Not only that, it could appear that you're taking some of the oil from lamp 1 into lamp number 2. You're taking the oil. So there is an appearance of that. There is an appearance that you are diminishing the mitzvah. And there's a huge difference. How do you understand Rav? My benayu, ike benayu. Second to last line. What happens to kamadlik mishraga l'shraga if you are kindling one candle directly from the other by the menorah? If, according to Rav Ada bar Ahava, according to the first opinion that we quoted, Rav, who disallows it to happen is only because of Bizu Mitzvah, and therefore mishraga l'shraga, even Rav will agree, yes, madlik. Last line. If you're going to follow the second opinion over here, that it's because of makrish mitzvah, then even mishraga l'shraga nami yasur. Very important. Now let's go. Mosav Rab Aviyot says in Abraisa, this question, as we'll see, is on the first opinion that it's connected to Bizu Mitzvah. Sela shel meiser sheni daf chav beis amid beis. You have a coin that's already meiser sheni money. Meiser sheni doesn't grow money, but if the Torah allows for us even lachatchila to exchange the kedusha of the produce that has to be taken and eaten in Yerushalayim, and it should be conferred upon money, which has to be taken and used for foods and drinks and consumed in Yerushalayim. Now, it was very common, right, that coins then got worn out, and if you wanted to make sure that the coin has the weight that it's supposed to have, so they had the classical two-sided weights. They would put the already known coin. This taka has the right dinner weight. They would take the questionable coin and put it on the other side, and they would see whether it has the same weight or not. So could you use the Meiser Sheni coin as the instrument to discover it's really in service of knowing what the other coin is? So we learned in Abraisa that Selo Shal Meiser Sheni ein shoiklin kenegdoi din reizov. You can't take another dinar or any other type of coin and counterweigh it. Why not? Bizu Mitzvah. And it says more, even if the reason why you want to discover the weight of the other coin is because you want to use it also to redeem other Meiser Sheni produce. Doesn't get diminished, correct? But there's a Bizu Mitzvah. Very good. That's the point. Now you may not do it. So asks the Gemara now, that the argument of Rob and Schmuel right? Is keep the Rav Shmuel directly. Why is that Ishleim? Because you're makrish. Here you're not makrish. You're not weakening. Avol bekisna. But if bekinsa, if you're going through a wood chip, then what did we learn? Then even Shmuel, who allows directly, will disallow. That means he subscribes to the Bizu Mitzvah. Then this Braisa is not going to refute Shmuel, right? Makes perfect sense. That even when you are using this match, this kinsa, nami shari, according to Shmuel, why does he allow it? Again, it's not that Shmuel argues with the concept of Bizu Mitzvah. It's a pasuk. You can't kick dirt to cover the dam. You're doing a mitzvah. Because since you are ultimately going to use it for a mitzvah, that's the word. You're taking the fire through a match to light another fire. If it's ultimately for mitzvah, you're not disrespecting. Here also, you're making a weight. Why are you weighing it? Because you want to use, at least in the times where you want to use the second coin to redeem more Meiser Sheni produce. So why won't this be a teyufta against Shmuel? Rabbi gives a great answer. I'll tell you why. Because when I light a match from the menorah, I will use now this match to light my third Chanukah candle. When I'm using when I'm using the Meiser Sheni Ma'os as the weight, let me ask you something. What happens if you discover that the other coin is lacking in weight? Then you're not going to use it. You're going to discard that coin as far as Ma'aser Sheni is concerned. You might never end up using the second coin for a mitzvah. What happens if it's not going to come out to be properly weighted? And now become mafki, so you're not going to use it for Kiddush. You're not going to use it for a mitzvah. So there is no ultimate mitzvah purpose. If there's no ultimate mitzvah purpose, even Shmuel will agree that there's a concept of Bizu Mitzvah. Like Masav Rab Sheshes, and as we'll see, this kasha will be really on both approaches. It says in a Braisa, in Parshas Emer, when the Torah is speaking about kindling the menorah in the Holy Temple, michutz laparoiches, from outside the curtain, but it's called miparoiches ha'edus, the curtain of the testimony. Now, normally, the curtain of the testimony means that the tablets, the Aron HaKodesh, right, Luchos ha'edus, that's the testimony that God gave us the Torah, and it's a curtain that's covering the luchos. In other words, the edus is on the other side of the curtain in the Holy of Holies. We'll see the whole darasha differently. So mechutz laparoiches edus yarech, that is where the word yarech means to arrange. Just to know, arranging doesn't mean to kindle. There's a mitzvah of kindling. We're going to go not with the Rambam, only done in the afternoon. But every morning there was a mitzvah to be marech, to prepare, right? It's called hatavas haneris. The kohanim would go in there. It's also Abaya have a masada. They never did all together. They did 5, they did 2, but they would clear out the oil. They would clear out the old wicks. They would put the new one. It would be already ready from the morning. Yarach oisim. So on this pasuk, the Bryce is asking, who needed the light of the menorah? Does God need the light of the menorah? God needs the light? Of course not. And I'll prove it to you. All of the 40 years that the Yidden went in the desert, we went to God's light. What God needs, our light. Hold on. 40 years in the desert, we went to God's light. But today in Tafshin Pei Beis, we're not going in God's light. Tosfos is moided here. Look inside the top Tosfos. Tema. Amay noket mem shana. What's this 40 years? Lo oilam. Forever, from the beginning of time until the end of all times, and not only in the desert. That should be God doesn't need. We are living in God's light. What do you mean we're making light for God? Listen to this, Chaver. Here's the kasha. You can argue, of course, we're going with God's light, but that doesn't mean today, when it's nighttime outdoors, doesn't mean that you don't put on the electric lights. No, it's Aaron is going inside the Kodesh, right? You don't have windows over there. It's not a stira. We are living in God's light, but you need to have, Gashmi is the light. That's the kasha. They didn't need it for the 40 years in the desert. People should know that. The Amud Anan, that pillar, the miraculous pillar of cloud, gave off so much light that indoors we had light from it.
What about those guys that needed dark?
What about, I was mamash going to say, so they had the eye patches. Oh, so the truth is, the answer would be that the Amud Anan was yoimam. Maybe the Eish at night was not as illuminated, but there was a certain type of miraculous physical light, to the point that he quotes from a Braisa that when they would look at a barrel, they would see X-ray inside the barrel. They were able to see inside everything. So we had access to such a light that it also affected the way physically we saw the world. So why did we need to have notes? Later on, when we went to Eretz Yisrael, you make a heichal, you got to have a menorah. But in the desert we had the anan. Oh, gewaltig. So answers the Gemara, Ella, no. First of all, Paroiches ha'edus, you know what the edus is not the luchos abris. The menorah is that which testifies about the presence of the infinity of godliness amongst the Jewish people. So it's the paroiches becomes the backdrop to the menorah. It's way to dig this. The paroiches of the menorah, that's the edus. The menorah is edus l'chol boya olam. You know why they lit the menorah? To have this testifying to the whole world that what shashchina shoyda be Yisrael. Now, how did the menorah give such a testimony? We'll see in a moment. There was something that was completely miraculous that happened in the menorah. And we lit it not for the light, but for the world to see how God is living amongst us. My edus, Amar Rav, or you have Amar Rava, Zu Neir Maravi. This refers to what we call the Western lamp. Machlokes and Menachos. Now, Rashi quotes two of the opinions. First of all, there's another argument. How did they place the menorah? East, west, or south? So if Kevin can put up a picture, don't forget that when you went into the temple, you're going from east to west. Whether it was in the tabernacle, whether it was later in the base, east to west. If the menorah was placed east to west, then common sense would be das balabatim, that many times it's hepach das Torah. The western lamp will be the one closest to the Holy of Holies. It's not that. It's Gaval. The Ner HaMaravi will be the second one from the east. The one closest to the outside, that's the Mizrachi. One over, just to know, is the Ner Maravi. If the menorah was placed north-south, then all of the lamps were equally close or far from the curtain. But 6, 3 on the right side, 3 of the left side, the wicks were facing towards the center. The wick of their center one was placed on the western part of the Keli. So the Ner HaMaravi was taka, that wick was the closest wick to and it was pointing towards the Paroiches. So whichever one that was, there was one lamp that we call the western lamp. What happened to the western lamp? Here's what happened to it. The quantity, the size of the lamp itself, the size of the receptacle was equal to all the others. And it was the amount that can hold a half a loig of oil. And therefore, you would think that since they were all kindled at the same time, they will all go out at the same time. But that's not what happened. Another quick intro. Where did the fire come? From where did they take fire to light the menorah? No, we learned this from the Mizbeach, but that's only when the miracle didn't happen. When the miracle happened, they never needed to take fire. And let me just speak out Rashi's way of understanding this miracle. Whichever one was the Ner HaMaravi, that fire never went out. But there's a mitzvah of Yarra. Yarra means you have to prepare the lamps. So when they lit it at night, in the morning, from the 7, 6 went out. The western candle was burning, not another minute, not another hour, until it was time to light it in the afternoon. So what they did is that they would lift out the wick. The wick is still burning. The other candles were already prepared. They would use that wick to light the other candles. While they were using that wick to light the other candles, they would quickly clean out and add new oil to the Ner HaMaravi, and then they would light it again. Bottom line is that there was one lamp that burnt the whole time. It wasn't that they didn't light it. They removed it and used that to light. So that's what Rashi says. That mimeno hoya madlik, that they would use that to light. They didn't need to take fire from the outer altar. They had fire here. And they would conclude, meaning they would prepare this one the last. Because why would they prepare it in the morning when it's still burning? But you have to light all 7 lamps every day. So at Mamash, at the end, they removed it and they cleaned it out. They put an oil and they lit all of it. Now, what's the point? Here in the Holy Temple, the physical lamps of the menorah cannot be removed. So how would they light one from the other? Kivan the Kaviyah Neiros. He's saying, L'choira, how would they light it? There was no way to go about it without using a wood chip. That's the Havamina. The maskana will be that they use their wick itself. The Havamina is that how did they light one from the other? By using a wood chip. And they did it. That's a problem. Why is that a problem? Because not only here you have Bizu Mitzvah. Kasha, bein lamand amma mishum Bizu Mitzvah, bein lamand amma mishum akhushay mitzvah. That means you're weakening the mitzvah. That means when you put the wood chip, when you put one article towards a candle, there is the appearance of you diminishing the flame. Someone might even think you're trying to siphon off some oil, even though you're not doing it. So you're weakening the mitzvah. So answers the Gemara, no, Papa, we're speaking about Psilas Aruchas. The wicks were very long. They were able to extend the wick from one to the other. The way it worked was they extended the wick to the neighboring, then the neighboring to the neighboring, then the neighboring to the neighboring, and that's the way they lived.
Why didn't they have a shamash or something?
They did not have a shamash. We have a shamash because of what we learned yesterday, that even a Adam Chashav, even though there's fire in the room, for there not to be the appearance that people are using the fire, there's another fire. Now, psilas aruchas, but here we have a problem. Soif, according to the opinion that subscribes to Akhushe Mitzvah, Akhushe Mitzvah means that Rav doesn't even allow for you to light one directly from the other. How was it allowed to do so in the Beis HaMikdash? And the Gemara says, kasha. Here, kasha means, therefore, we are rejecting the second interpretation of the machlokes. Kasha means that we are now going to accept that the argument between Rav and Shmuel is only when you are using a wood chip. Going direct is permitted, even according to Rav. Now, I know that we mentioned Rashi, that we don't paskin like Rav. The subsequent sugi will be all based on Rav. It's now that we came to the conclusion that their argument is about Bizu Mitzvah. What does Bizu Mitzvah tell you? That doing it directly should be permitted. Now the Gemara is going to introduce another challenge of doing it directly, not connected to Bizu Mitzvah. So asks the Gemara, so my Havala, can you directly light one from the other, even according to Rav, based on this? Oh, Rav's argument was not direct. Could you do it directly? You're going to say, if his argument was only through a wood chip, then the answer would be yes. No, there's another issue. There's another issue. What's the other issue? We spoke it out in the intro. If we're going to say hadlaka oisa mitzvah, that the lighting itself, the kindling, is the principal accomplishment of the mitzvah, then madlikin min lener. There's no Bizu Mitzvah because you're doing it directly, and the act of passing the fire is the mitzvah. When you're doing an act of a mitzvah directly, there's no Bizu Mitzvah. We don't care about that. Now, if the placement is the mitzvah, the placement means that what is the mitzvah? Not the kindling itself. Kindling is like the preliminary. After you lit it, now the kinate is resting. So even the lighting is not considered the mitzvah. So now we're back to Bizu Mitzvah. It's in the Beis HaMikdash for sure. The lighting was the mitzvah. Lahadlik. What's the din and the menorah? So I know that it's late. So let's go another couple of lines. But I want you to know that one of the conclusions that the Gemara will bring that the mitzvah is lahadlik is from the Nusach HaBracha. Lahadlik ner Chanukah. And indeed, just to know, even l'Rav, we paskin like Shmuel, even l'Rav, direct will be allowed. Because the mitzvah is hadlaka and not hanacha. They asked in the yeshiva, hadlaka oisa mitzvah, or hanacha oisa mitzvah. Let's try to resolve this. Tashma, we learned, Tashma normally is a Mishnah, but here it's a Amoraim. The Amarava, hoyu tafois ner Chanukah v'oimed, if a person lit the Chanukah, guys, listen to this, you never placed it anywhere. You're holding the menorah the whole time in your hand. Says, Rava, lo yosef lo klum, you did nothing. Now, if the mitzvah is to kindle it, why not? Zaraya, the mitzvah is the placement. Shmamina, no chayse mitzvah. Answers the Gemara, no. Here again today. That Hasam, Haroya, Oimer, Lutzor, Chayhu, Denakadlo. Persuma Nisa is not secondary. By Chanukah, it's part of the mitzvah. If you don't have Persuma Nisa, you don't have the mitzvah. If a person is holding fire in their hand, the observer won't know that you're doing it for the mitzvah of Chanukah. It was very common that at night, people walked around with a flashlight. Doesn't look like the mitzvah. Like one more. Tashma, the Amar Rava, what happens if you lit it inside the house? We learned yesterday that you're supposed to light it outdoors. By the way, today that we light it indoors, you have to do it for your family members. If not, there's no Persuma Nisa. But when you light it inside and then you take it outside, you did nothing. The question is, why not? If you're going to say, that's the Rashi Tevis, that hadlaka is the mitzvah. In other words, Meilet makes sense that hadlaka b'mekayim b'inun. You have to light it in its place. The place is mibachutz. And therefore, Mishumach, if you lit it indoors, even though you placed it outdoors for the right share of time, you did nothing. Again, a proof. More says, no, not a proof. Hasam Nami, it's all because of Persuma Nisa. That Haroyo hu oimer, the one who sees someone carrying a fire outside, will think, if they don't see you lighting it, the transportation of a torch is what everyone does the whole year around. People walked at night with torches. So it's a persumanisha aspect. So we're going to leave over here. We're up to the final. So that's the question mark, and that will relate to what will be Shitas Rava, whether you can light a candle directly to the other. A lot more to be continued.
Rabbi, can you clarify that the hadlaka versus hanacha?
Yeah.
How that would prove that you could light from one to the other or not? What's the
Yeah. So
connection there?
Rav holds that using a wood chip is called Bizu Mitzvah. But Rav will agree that if you are directly doing a mitzvah with it, why is wood chip a Bizu Mitzvah? Because the flame is going from a mitzvah flame and you're passing it over to a non-mitzvah flame. The wood chip is in it. It's taka need, it's a preliminary, but it's not mitzvah proper. If hadlaka oisa mitzvah, then you can light one from the other because you're using it directly for a fire, for a mitzvah. But if hanacha oisa mitzvah, the hadlaka is also a preliminary. Gavaldik. And since the hanacha is the hadlaka is a hechsher mitzvah, it's also a bizer mitzvah. The fire went from a mitzvah to a only hechsher mitzvah. You downgraded the fire.
All right, I got to think about that.
It's great.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, guys. The computer apps arbeit nicht. That's the meaning of computers.